Let me ask you, when you give a tour and you mentioned that the order of march was candy, then cane.
Right.
Does any idiot make a joke about candy canes or anything?
Sure, you can put green in front of them. Then you got a green candy cane.
Okay, so you're the one that makes the jokes.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, Addressing Gettysburg listeners. It is the holiday season. It is the week of Christmas. And while there are the 12 days of Christmas, I just didn't have enough time to do a 12 days of Christmas thing. So what I'm going to do instead is a 7 days of Christmas. So today and the 7 days after, 6 days after, I guess, you're going to receive a little gift. You know, Patreon is, it's kind of how we are able to do as much as we do and how we hope to enable ourselves to do more than what we do for you. I don't think maybe you, I don't know, don't really have an idea of what goes on over there. The previews that we put up are, only 15 minutes or whatever, but we don't put the previews up for everything. And so now, not all of these are preview-less episodes that you're going to hear. There are previews out there for these episodes, but I thought we would give you the rest of them. Just so that you can hear what they're like from beginning to end and kind of get a better feel for everything. Because as it kind of naturally occurs, people loosen up after about 15 minutes. So the first 15 minutes that we give you in those previews are really before things get rolling, before everybody loosens up and there's a flow established and everybody gets into it. So I thought, why not, as a thank you to all of you who listen here on the free feed. And by the way, I mean, our numbers shot through the roof. I think we went up like 900 something percent this year from January to now. And I think we hit that by July, if I'm not mistaken. And actually it's been going up. So I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. Eric figured out the numbers at one point and that was months ago. So it's probably different now. But anyway, my point is that you all listening have been awesome. And one need not become a patron to support the show. All you need to do is let everybody know about it. Tell all of your history nerd friends about it and keep on listening yourself. Share it whenever possible. If you can do a 5-star review, do that. We don't really ask for that a lot. I find that kind of, I don't know, unbecoming, but it's how it all works. And I really, really should do it because that's the way this whole thing works. But so, yeah, if you can do a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, that's where it's at. Apple Podcasts is the platform that really matters. And our numbers from Apple Podcasts are tremendous. The gap between Apple Podcasts and all the other platforms is enormous. So thank you for all of that. And as a thank you, here during the holiday season at the end of the year, I'm going to give you some episodes for free that are over at Patreon from the last year in the hopes that maybe you'd consider joining us over there and becoming a part of the little community that's growing over on Patreon. A lot more is in the works for other tiers and what that might be on Patreon. We're going to be adding a new tier that will include live video of interviews with these people that you can actually participate in. It's not like a Zoom call. It's more like watching something on YouTube, but we'll be able to take questions from you at the end of those episodes directly off the comments if you wanted to come in and watch and comment and write and send some questions in. So that is one of the things that we hope to unveil this winter for you over at patreon.com. Okay, so let's start. I'm not going to do long intros like this for all of them. The first one we're going to start with is probably the oldest episode that we have in the can. We recorded it in, it was probably around June, I believe, of 2018. For those of you who don't really know the history of the show, the idea of this show goes back to 2012. And it was originally a film that was going to be about the history of tourism here. But then I said, you know what? Podcasting is a lot easier and it's a lot cheaper. and you can do a lot more with it than you can with a film. So I decided to convert it to podcasting in March or so, I think, of 2018. And then we got the wheels in motion and started recording stuff that summer, knowing full well we weren't going to release anything until 2019, probably in the summer. We weren't really sure because I wanted to do this better than, just a typical podcast setup that you hear all over the place with these things. So it was going to take work. But anyway, we started recording to have things in the can. And one of the first things we did was an episode on Culp's Hill with Charlie Fennell. Now, for those of you who don't know, Charlie Fennell is like the Culp's Hill guy. He's a licensed battlefield guide. He's a lot of fun to talk to, as you're going to hear. And he's just the guy you go to when you want to know about Culp's Hill, period. So we had him on, and we recorded at Gettysburg Tours. So you're going to hear buses going by and crickets and birds and all other things because we were outdoors. Yeah, that's about it. I'm going to let Charlie do the talking. A lot of people on Patreon say that they love this episode. Culp's Hill, people are starting to have a respect for Culp's Hill more and more as time goes on. And I guess that's why people like it. I'm sure part of it has to do with just listening to Charlie. He's a great guy. We've had him on the free feed before, so I'm sure you've heard him and you know who I'm talking about. So anyway, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Charlie Fennell, Culp's Hill, from the Patreon feed. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Addressing Gettysburg, episode 107, part 2. And we are going to be talking today about Culp's Hill and everything that happened on Culp's Hill. With me, as always, is Peter Bonfanti. Hello, Peter.
Hello.
How are you?
Good to be actually in Gettysburg.
In Gettysburg, yes, exactly. We've got you down here. The whole world is happy.
Yes. Well, just I am.
We spent the day out on Benner's Hill.
That's right.
And a not often visited part of the battlefield.
And we actually visited across the street. What is that, Hanover Street?
That is the Hanover Road, yeah.
Hanover Road. And we went across the street where there's no path. It's just grassy.
Just grassy.
And we saw the cannonballs
out
there.
We saw the cannonballs out there. That's right. Yes, that's the only place apparently on the battlefield that has the stack of balls.
Oh, wait.
And now the National Park Service knows what we only knew before.
All right.
All right. Well, then we'll cut that part
We will
out.
edit that out.
You think the Park Service doesn't know that those are there?
They know they're there. They mow around them.
They mow.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely, the grass was definitely cut.
Yes.
Because it was higher on the lawn next to us.
National Park
Right.
land.
All right.
Hey, the superintendent doesn't know, but he's not going to be here long enough to worry about.
Do we have a super? I thought we don't
we
have
do.
one.
Chris is his name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he'll be here till the middle of July.
He's acting though.
So
He's acting.
did we stumble upon like a big guide secret by going up on Benner's Hill and seeing the
Probably.
cannonballs?
Yeah, both of the guys.
We're the ones that
don't know
ruined it.
Yeah, like we parked at the little turnaround circle and
Yeah,
we just
sure.
walked and Matt's like, oh, let's go across the street. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that was there.
Yeah.
And then we saw that.
Yeah.
And then we have other questions about Benner's Hill, but we'll get to that later in the discussion.
And so the other voices that you hear are licensed battlefield guide Bob Steenstra, who's been with us before. Hello, Bob. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
And our special guest for today's episode is the expert on Culp's Hill. He wrote a pamphlet on Culp's Hill. And his name is Charlie Fennell. Welcome, Charlie. You also are a licensed battlefield guide.
Thank you for having me
here at Gettysburg National Military
Happy
Park.
to be here.
We're very happy to have you. Everybody has said to me, if you're going to do Culp's Hill, you got to get Charlie Fennell. Why is that, Charlie?
Well, probably because I was one of the first ones to publish anything on the Hill
Okay.
back in 1992. Most people don't know what happened there. It's hard to figure out,
Right.
you know.
And why? Why is that not so popular?
Well, there's about 2 or 3 reasons. One is because you can't see anything when you get there. It's in the woods.
Okay, it's in
There's
the
no
woods.
vistas like Little Round Top Pickett's Charge.
True.
The other reason is near the end of the tour, and everybody wants to go to the swimming pool by then, or the ice cream.
Okay.
Okay. So by that time, they've had enough of Gettysburg, and that's where to go. The other problem with Culp's Hill is there's a confusion of monuments.
Yes.
Monuments on both sides of the road, and
Yeah.
there was fighting there on 2 days, heavy fighting on 2 days. One of the few places at Gettysburg where there was heavy fighting on 2 different days.
Over the same ground.
Over the same ground, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what is it? We ask this of everybody that comes on the show, and it's just a general kind of. Would esoteric be the word? What's the word I'm looking for?
No, edit that out.
What is that?
Not esoteric.
What is it? Just answer me.
I don't know what you're trying to say.
Tell me to edit it.
I don't know what you're trying
What's
to say.
the question? Why Gettysburg? What kind
Philosophical?
of philosophical? That's the word I was looking for.
Okay.
It's kind of a philosophical question that we ask everybody. Why Gettysburg? Why is that important to you? What is the draw to you initially?
Yeah, you know, psychologists, whoever they are, tell you when you're about 10, something will happen to change the rest of your life.
Right.
And when I was 10, it was the centennial of Civil War. So everything was, Civil War. Pittsburgh Post-Gazette had articles in the Parade magazine about Pennsylvania units in the Civil War. And I was always kind of interested in military history, but I was a Napoleonic guy, it was a lot more colorful and that sort of thing. And then I found out, man, there's a major battle not far from where I live. Now, I grew up in western Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So I was never on a battlefield before, So my parents brought me here. I think when I was 11. It was 1964. It's the first time I came to Gettysburg. And I said, wow, this is amazing. I'm on a battlefield where people fought and died for what they believed in. Mm-hmm. And it never left me. At that point, I started to think more about the Civil War because it was fought in America.
Right, right.
And I started changing my focus from Napoleon and more European wars to the Civil War.
Now, how did you get into Napoleon, though?
It's an interesting story. Life magazine.
Okay.
Life magazine had a special issue on Napoleon. Had all the famous paintings.
Right.
The Hougoumont, and the old guard standing there being slaughtered at the end, So that's kind of drew me into it. Of course, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, a lot of the TV programs were war related.
Sure.
World War II was just over, Korea. So that was very popular.
And you had what was it? The Red Badge of Courage was a big movie back then,
movie,
right?
Sure.
So so you had a lot of stuff that was war related and Civil War related, specifically. Yeah. So, I
think it's a great story actually, because one of our goals of doing this podcast, that you're listening to, is to get people. This is the article in Parade magazine. Yeah, we want it, like, this exists.
Yeah.
Hours from where millions of people live, and they'll never come here.
They'll never come here, right?
So if we can have one little spark of interest, one great story that can be told, or whatever it may be, like, just to come visit this and experience this living history that's all around us.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just love coming here. I'm so glad I'm here today. But like if it wasn't for you to spark my interest in it, I would have never come here. And the same thing when
when I came here for the
first time. So that's what we hope to do with that. So hopefully we can be that inspiration to somebody else.
And we all have those stories, right? And that's why we ask that question, is because everybody has that story about what got them. Because there's something about this place over all the other battlefields that I've ever been to, at least, that is, I don't know, it captures something of my imagination that none of the other ones do. Maybe it's because it's huge. Who knows, right? But so everybody has those stories. All right, and then so when you get into Gettysburg, then why did you get into Culp's Hill specifically? What was your interest there before you became a guide, let's say? Or did it come after you became a guide?
Probably came after I became a guide.
Okay.
I used to go to Culp's Hill when I was done, just hang out over there, kind of detox, get ready for the real world.
Right.
And I started sparking my interest. So, I asked some of my colleagues, I said, what happened there? And they said, well, nobody knows. There's nothing really written on Culp's Hill. And I said, wow. That's a shame. It's a major part of the battle, and not a lot written on it, and a lot of people don't go there. So that's what sparked my interest. I wanted to find out what really happened there.
So you talk about not a lot being written about it. And I've been told, and I believe this to be true because it was guides that have told me this, that the reason we don't hear so much about Culp's Hill as much as we do Little Round Top is because nobody on Culp's Hill could write like Chamberlain could write. And that kind of led to Shara, relying heavily on that for The Killer Angels, and then the movie, and then now, because originally people were interested in seeing Culp's Hill when they would come here. Is that not true?
Yeah, that was the most visited part of the battlefield.
Yeah.
There's a couple of reasons for it. One, it's accessible off the Baltimore Pike.
Okay.
And then there was, of course, it's in the shade.
Yeah.
There's the woods there.
Right.
And you have Spangler Springs so you can access water.
Right.
I think the main draw, though, is the damage.
On the trees, you could see the trees.
They just shot up. People don't go to New York City after 9/11 and look at the parts that were Empire State Building. Say, look at standing. They go look in the hole that was the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
So that's why they come to Culp's Hill initially. There's actually a rock that had an advertisement on it that we have a picture of. 1867.
Right. And what was that for?
Well, it was for advertising for people that were coming to Culp's Hill. So they'd buy Hoofland's German bitters or Rogers liver pills.
Okay.
That's what was advertised on those rocks there.
And
1867.
I'm assuming it's gone from those rocks.
The rocks are still there, though.
But so we know what rocks they are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But there's no sign of it on the rocks?
No sign. They painted it on.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't chisel it on like they did the stuff in Devil's Den.
Well, no, and that's another thing. So so there are a lot of things that are interesting about Culp's Hill. You mentioned chiseling into a rock. Mm-hmm. There's the, Jake, what's the name of it?
Cobble Rock.
Cobble Rock.
Right.
I was trying to give Jake a shining moment there.
Yeah, Jake's there, man. He knows where the rock is.
Yeah.
Jake is the rock.
Jake, yeah, he is. So anyway, the Cobble Rock?
Yes.
And what's the story behind that?
Well, it's in North Carolina, first North Carolina. A number of different stories. It's Leonidas Coble. Supposedly he comes back, maybe with his son, wants to show somewhere he fought, and he carves his name in the rock where he fought. We don't know exactly when. Probably, I suspect he might have scratched it in with a bayonet during the battle because they're there for 7 hours. So, what are you going to do in your spare time? Yeah. And so he scratched it in, and then when he came back, he cut it in deeper.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now, so let's talk about the battle a little bit.
Okay.
All right. So, Culp's Hill for me is the one part of the battlefield I'm not really well versed in, and I think part of that is because when I owned Gettysburg Tours, which is where we're recording from today, by the way, we didn't cover that on our tour. So when I went out on the tours and listened to the guides talking, it was about everything basically except that part, right? And also, it didn't capture my imagination like Little Round Top did, although it was. As I'm learning now, as I'm reading about it, it's pretty dramatic down there. I would say a little more dramatic because it lasted far longer than Little Round Top did, right? So let's start, first of all, there's the whole thing with Lee giving that order and using the term, if practicable. Okay. What are your thoughts on the whole? And Bob, feel free to jump in whenever you want. But what are your thoughts on the whole thing about if practical? Like, is it really that big of a deal? Did Ewell... just give me your opinion on...
Well, you got to go with the whole order. A lot of people just say, take that hill if practicable. Now, the hill that Lee was referring to is Cemetery Hill.
Yeah.
Okay, but the caveat to that, there's a condition. And that's do not bring on a general engagement until the rest of the divisions of the Army are here.
So that's still standing, that order.
Yeah, that's what Ewell was told.
But the most of the first day's battle is over by this point.
Yes, it is.
So hasn't a general engagement really been brought on?
Yes, but Lee doesn't want another one. Because the first day is ending. And, the problem with the Confederate Army here, and I tell this to people all the time, the big failure the Confederates at Gettysburg. It's not an individual failure. It's a failure of information.
Okay, yeah.
They don't have information.
Right.
How are you going to make a decision without it?
Right.
You go to a restaurant, you look at the menu. You have information.
Right.
Lee doesn't have a menu.
Right.
He's in a restaurant he's never been in before. He doesn't know what to do. So he gives this order. It's conditional. And so there's Ewell, take the hill, but don't get shot doing it. That's an impossible order to comply with. I would suggest to you that that's probably Lee's worst order he ever gave in the Civil War, or even before.
Right.
It's because of information. So I don't blame Ewell for not taking the hill. Of course, Ewell look at Cemetery Hill. It's occupied. Looks like they're going to defend it. And then that's when the attention is directed towards Culp's Hill. Doesn't seem to be occupied.
Right. And so then Johnson, I believe, sends some men up there to reconnoiter what's going on, if anything, right? Yes. And they run into the 7th Indiana?
7th Indiana elements of it, yes.
All right. Now, that was enough to scare them off?
Well, they walk up the hill. It's dark by this time, of course. It's after 7 o'clock in the evening. They go up there, and the 7th Indiana has a skirmish line from the top of the hill to Rock Creek.
Okay.
Then there's 528 of them.
So top of the hill to Rock Creek. Let's just give people an idea of that. Okay,
sure.
so if you go to the battlefield today, let's say the top of the hill is where the observation tower is.
That's correct.
So that would be their left.
That would be their left.
Okay, and then it goes down the hill into the valley to the creek where their right would rest, right?
Yeah, it would be down along Spangler Spring. A lot of people know where that is. So that would be the right flank.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they've got a skirmish line there. Just, I mean, as a warning, really.
Right.
The idea to hold Culp's Hill in the Union Army really hasn't taken root yet, has it?
No, it hasn't.
So it's really just a precaution because that's a blind spot to the rest of the army on Cemetery Hill. All right, so, but it's enough to scare off the Confederates who are probing around there. Okay. They go back to Johnson goes back to Ewell and says, "No, there's troops up there." And Ewell says, "All right, forget it.
Right.
It's getting dark. Forget it. We'll leave it." So the next day comes along. Well, now in the meantime, what's happening on Culp's Hill in the Union Army?
Well, can I interrupt?
Yeah, go right ahead, Bob.
Who sent the 7th Indiana up there?
Well, 7th Indiana was sent there by Hancock.
By Hancock.
Yeah, Winfield Scott Hancock.
Now Hancock comes to the field with orders from Meade saying to take command of the field until I arrive.
That's exactly right.
And Hancock gets up there. Now, does he recognize Culp's Hill as something that should be at least looked into when he gets on the field?
Yeah, he comes up there, and of course, Hancock assesses the situation. And he knows the Confederates can't take the hill directly. The town's in the way.
Right.
You can't form a line in a town, so you got to go around it. So he's looking at the terrain around Cemetery Hill.
Wait, something happened here. Hold on. Everything just went out. I don't understand what's going on.
Oh, your headphone came out.
Oh.
There you go.
Oh, sorry.
So we were
I must
on
have
the-
kicked that.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Let's take that again. So, I was asking about Hancock, right?
Yeah,
That was it.
Hancock's.
Okay.
Yeah. And he saw that you can't take the hill directly from the town because the buildings are in the way. You can't form a line in a town. You can form columns,
Right.
which is formula for disaster.
Right.
So he sends troops to Culp's Hill.
Formula for disaster, why?
Why? Because you're a mass target coming down. It's like bowling pins on a bowling lane.
Okay. So you're in a column.
Yes.
And one artillery shell, if it's lucky, can go right through that column and take half the men out.
Take 24 men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas you're in a line, you're only going to take maybe
2
or 3.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So continue.
Yeah, so that's what he sees. So he sends men to Culp's Hill to anchor the right flank of Cemetery Hill, and he sent men to Little Round Top as well. So down Cemetery Ridge, and essentially what he has established is the Union fishhook.
But it's incomplete. But this is where he wants the two flanks to be.
Occupied,
right.
But you can go to Culp's. You can go to Little Round Top, and there were elements of the 12th Corps that were sent there. John White Geary's brigades. Green's brigade is going to defend Culp's Hill. Was originally in the shadow of Little Round Top.
Okay.
On the evening of July 1st, morning of the 2nd.
Okay. And
I'm sorry. This is because Hancock is taking control of the battlefield, and whoever's just coming up, he's sending to check out these different areas.
Exactly.
So that's why if I were to be traveling along these roads, I might see a different corps mixed in with everyone else. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Green, you mentioned George Sears Green.
I did.
He is a brigadier general.
Right.
And he's 62 years old.
Yes.
Oldest in the Army of the Potomac or the United States Army altogether?
Oldest in the Army of the Potomac.
At that rank?
At that rank.
Not oldest.
Probably not the oldest.
Okay.
Right.
Now, I found something interesting. I was at Antietam last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
He commanded a division there.
Yes.
But now he's commanding a brigade.
Right.
Which is a smaller unit.
Right.
Why?
Well, because at Antietam, the men ahead of him were wounded or captured.
Oh, so he went up to division command.
Yeah, he's
okay.
temporary command of the division. That would be, that's why Williams is commanding the Corps. An ancestor of mine actually commanded the Corps.
Really?
Okay, yeah. Mansfield, General Mansfield.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He died there, right?
Yeah.
At Antietam.
He's only on the field a while. They couldn't see. He's one of the oldest generals in the Union Army.
Right.
And he goes out in front and thought there were Union troops out there and they're Confederates and they killed
And he
them.
goes and asks them for some
Williams
tobacco.
will get the Corps.
Right.
And then Geary was wounded at Cedar Mountain. And so Green is elevated to division command.
Okay, I got it. All right, so he's just in temporary command.
He's temporary.
So now, okay, so he's a division or a brigade commander here,
Yeah.
and he is he resting on? They're not even they're just ordered to kind of hang out on Culp's Hill, right? He's not really, because he wants to fortify the hill,
right?
And both his superiors, Geary and Slocum, are like, meh.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And they go ahead. We're not going to be here long, but go ahead.
Yeah, over on Little Round Top, he's eventually ordered, the 12th Corps will be ordered to Culp's Hill to solidify that line.
Okay.
And they're going to replace the 7th Indiana.
Okay.
Okay, so Williams and Geary's divisions then will move to that position. Among Geary's division will be Green's brigade.
Okay.
So they get there, and they've already seen that the 1st Corps, it'll be Wadsworth's division, or what's left of it after the first day, has already constructed the defensive barricades. And so the discussion begins to we build them. Okay, and Geary espoused the theory that men that fight behind breastworks are unfit to fight without them.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it robs you of your offensive enthusiasm.
Right.
You see, and that's what wins battles in the theory of the day.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and so they're discussing this topic. Green overhears them and decides he's going to have the breastworks anyway, because his concern's saving lives.
Right.
And so he goes off and orders his men to build the breastworks. And when they start building them, they've been further down the hill in the 12th Corps looking at what they're doing and saying, boy, doesn't that look like a great idea? We ought to have them too.
Okay.
And so eventually by noon, you have an entrenched position all around Culp's Hill down into Spangler Spring.
All right, so, okay. Now, that is what time of day?
Well, that would be in the morning of July 2nd. By noon, 2nd. I think they're finished.
Now, so, meanwhile, okay, so by noon, they're done building the breastworks on Culp's Hill.
Yes.
Simultaneously, on the Confederate lines, or not on the lines, but in the Confederate High Command with Robert E. Lee, what's going on? What's he planning?
Well, Lee has made a plan, and basically, it was formulated in the early morning of July the 2nd, and the principal attack on the second day was to be conducted by Longstreet's Corps minus Pickett.
Right.
Pickett's still Chambersburg. And that's conducted on the Union left. It was to be supported in the center by A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps, and then General Ewell, the 2nd Corps, was to make a simultaneous demonstration to be converted into a real attack should the opportunity present itself. So what's going on in the Confederate Army, they're waiting for Longstreet to get into position.
Okay.
And he doesn't get there till around 3 o'clock on the afternoon of July the 2nd.
So this is supposed to be coordinated.
Yes.
Now, I had always heard, but Bob, I think, recently corrected me on this, that it's not true that Ewell was supposed to wait for the sound of Longstreet's guns and commence. Is that, where did I hear that?
My understanding is when he hears the sound of Longstreet's guns, that's when he's supposed to start his demonstration. What I think we were talking about, Matt, is the question of, did they actually hear the sound of Longstreet's guns?
Oh,
and
that's
Charlie
right.
might be able to help with that. Now,
okay.
The Confederate artillery will open up pretty quickly. What, half hour maybe, Charlie? Or so after Longstreet's
you were on
guns?
Benner's Hill. What's it say on the tablets? 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock.
4
o'clock.
When's the guns go off? Around 4 o'clock. So they're simultaneously demonstrating. But whether Ewell heard it or not, there's this, the acoustic shadow.
Yeah.
The real ghost at Gettysburg is the acoustic shadow, you see. And whether Ewell heard it or not doesn't matter, because his men are told what to do. Ewell, as far as I know, never gave an order to Johnson to advance. He sees the opportunity and moved. Go ahead.
For those people that may not know, what's acoustic shadow?
Great question.
Yeah, it's an
Explain
area
it to me like I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
Yeah. Acoustic shadow is an area of the ground that generally is lower, and so the sound goes over you.
Okay.
And so you might be in the vicinity of something very noisy, but you can't hear it.
Gotcha.
It's on the other side of a hill.
It's on the other side of the hill.
And this is a phenomenon that was reported at other Civil War battlefields.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And supposedly, when they said the Slocum came up late on the first day, they blamed it once again on our ghost, the acoustic shadow, because he didn't hear the guns at Gettysburg.
Oh.
Okay, so that's another application of it for Gettysburg.
Now, am I making this up? Slocum, and they made some kind of pun with his name because he was always Slocum, like his always.
That was Howard's brother Charles.
Okay, so I wasn't making that up then.
Yeah, you weren't making it up.
All right, so now here's where it kind of can get kind of confusing to people, and in fact, like both flanks when they're attacked, the stuff that goes on is very confusing.
Sure.
But so we're just talking about Culp's Hill today. So Longstreet starts, just give me it again. Longstreet starts at what time?
Around 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock. Now, he starts, that's the artillery that's opening up then.
Right.
So they're both opening up around 4 o'clock on both flanks. Okay. But the idea is that the infantry is supposed to go forward roughly at the same time so that the Union Army can't do what the Union Army ended up doing. Right? Which is to move reinforcements from one flank to the other. But that's what happened. Because Ewell didn't make his infantry attack until how much later?
Well, Ewell's not supposed to attack. He's supposed to demonstrate simultaneously.
Okay, all right.
And then make a real attack should the opportunity present itself. Okay. The opportunity doesn't present itself until most of the 12th Corps is ordered towards Little Round Top. And his men can see them leaving. Don't you think if they leave, we have an opportunity?
Sure.
And that's when Johnson advances.
All right, I love this.
That's the trick.
See, okay, this is what this is what I can never understand. So they're not supposed to both attack.
Right. Not simultaneous on the second.
Right.
Right.
They're supposed to. So Ewell is basically just supposed to hold their attention.
Yes.
So that they can't go and support Sickles down on the left.
Right.
All right. This is now starting to clear things up for me.
So you do it on both sides. You don't know where, which side they're going to,
right.
which flank.
Well, to demonstrate, when you fire artillery in the Civil War, it means you're up to something.
Right.
You don't just shoot it for the noise.
Right.
And so if you're Meade, you're wondering if the real attack is a Longstreet or if there's an attack coming. But after an hour of artillery fire, Meade starts to think, well, this is just a demonstration.
Okay, so he's not falling for it on the right, but he's seeing troops attacking Sickles down on the left, and he knows what's going on there.
Sickles is going to start to fall apart, as you know, and he's going to start shifting
Literally, he loses
massive
a leg.
troops from other parts of his line.
Yeah, okay, now, so you mentioned Benner's Hill.
I did.
Benner's Hill, a little northeast of Culp's Hill-ish?
Yeah.
Right, a little bit, sort of?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay. And
about a mile, 1.1 miles or so.
We have this phone app and we figured
it
out.
5/8.
5/8 of the mile?
5/8
Oh, okay.
Benner's Hill. Depending on what part you're standing on.
We were all the way at the end of the line. Nelson's end of it.
That would be a little more than 5/8. Sure.
Okay, well there you go. All right, so Benner's Hill is a great platform to have 2 battalions of artillery to fire. Okay, it's a nice, clear, open hill, but it's also a really bad place to be when you have enemy guns on higher ground less than a mile or more
less than a mile
away from you. Okay. So what happens to Latimer's battalion? Latimer is a Confederate artillery battalion commander.
That's correct.
And he is the one who opens up at 4 o'clock from Ewell's Corps towards East Cemetery and Culp's Hill.
Correct.
Right, okay. What happens to them?
Well, Latimer's battalion gets decimated. Because, you have a nice platform there. It's nice open ground. But, of course, they can be seen clearly from the Union position. So he's going to track fire from Cemetery Hill, from Culp's Hill, and from Powers Hill. So he's going to get basically caught in a crossfire there. One man, I think it was one of Longstreet's staff officers, rides up there, and he said he never saw a battalion, an artillery battalion, in such a condition of wreck as Latimer's was on Benner's Hill on July 2nd. He said the caissons were exploded, guns were dismounted, horses were killed, some of them were wounded, thrashing in the harnesses, and men were crawling through, shooting them with their pistols to kill them so they wouldn't
bash in the brains
of the wounded.
Yeah.
And when they pull Latimer out, they're going to have to use the horses over. They don't have enough horses to pull all the guns off at the same time.
Oh, okay. So they would unhitch them and go back and get another.
And bring the other guns down.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty devastating. I think Cabell's battalion might be the only one that has higher casualties.
Whose?
Cabell. He's on the southern end of the field.
Oh, all right. I always thought that was Cabell. I had never.
Yeah, well, it depends on who you're with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Cabell or Cabell?
Cabell. I like Cabell. It sounds more,
French.
southern.
Yeah.
It does.
Cabell. Bell.
Right.
Okay. How many? So in a battalion of artillery, how many men are we talking?
Well,
roughly on paper.
I mean, you got 20 guns. You figure 100 a gun, so you're looking at about 2,000. Probably a lot less. You're looking at maybe 1,500 men.
Let's answer that question again when that turns.
Yeah.
That's close enough. All right, so in a battalion of artillery in the Confederate Army, on paper, how many men are we talking about?
In a battery, you got about 100 men per battery, 4 guns. So you got 20 guns up there. You're looking around between 1,000 and 1,500 men.
Okay, that's more than I thought. I thought it was, okay. All right.
Now, the Confederates, of course, those are paper numbers. You're going to have less because of casualties.
Sure.
And Benner had to go, on Benner's Hill, they bring infantry up to help push the guns back into position because the artillerymen are getting hit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so.
All right.
It fluctuates. You have the same thing on Culp's Hill. Some of Greene's men at the top of the hill are being used to push the Union guns back into position as they're firing off the hill because of casualties.
Okay. Yeah. So how long is Latimer out there demonstrating before he has to?
Yeah, most accounts say an hour and a half, roughly.
Hour and a half. So an hour and a half, and he's taking this pummeling the whole time. Mm-hmm. Is it effective is his fire effective in the Union lines?
There's casualties that occur initially, especially on Cemetery Hill because they got a good view.
It's a little
Wainwright,
more open.
who's the commander of Union artillery in East Cemetery Hill, said it was very effective.
Okay.
There for a time, and then of course it started to be less accurate as smoke ensued and casualties began to occur. Now on Cemetery Hill, they've actually entrenched the Union guns.
Right.
What they would call hardening the position today. And so a lot of the stuff that's flying in there is less effective because of those entrenchments, lunettes.
Lunettes, I was trying to think of the word,
Yes.
Damn it. You beat me to it.
That's all right.
I wouldn't have gotten it.
Yeah.
It was been too long. Okay, so the infantry goes in when? Now you said Johnson sees an opportunity.
Yes.
And that opportunity is what again?
Around 7 o'clock, we'll say. Around 7 o'clock.
But what he sees is that most of the 12th Corps, except for Greene's 1,400 or so men, is gone.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because basically when you have the 12th Corps on Culp's Hill, okay, Slocum is supposedly the wing commander. He commands more than one corps, like Reynolds did on the first day.
Right.
So he's the wing. They have 2 wings, a left wing and a right wing, otherwise the chicken flies in a circle. And so Slocum is the right wing commander. And he's got the 5th Corps, and he's got the 12th Corps, and eventually maybe even the 6th Corps answers to him. Okay, so he's still acting as wing commander. Mm-hmm. And Slocum is the corps commander. So when Meade sees the need to order the 12th Corps off of Culp's Hill, he sends the order to Slocum, who then sends it to Williams. Okay, friction of command. You know how long the wire is, the longer it is, the more chances you have a misconnection, misinterpretation.
Okay.
And so Williams decides to take his division only, 3 brigades, and leave Geary behind to occupy the entrenchments. Be fine. He's got 3 brigades, be fine. So Williams marches off, and the Confederates see him leave. Okay. So they start to say, hey, they're leaving. So Johnson then begins to organize his advance from behind Benner's Hill.
Okay.
So about 7:30, they're hitting the trench line. By that time, what happens is that Meade sees only 1 division. He tells Slocum, I meant the whole corps. And so orders go to Geary to take his division and follow Williams. Williams doesn't know this, because there doesn't seem to be any need since Slocum's supposed to be commanding the corps.
Right.
And so Geary starts marching off, and Candy goes first, then Kane. Greene's waiting his turn. By that time, Johnson's men are attacking.
So
Johnson's division.
So Williams's division goes to aid Sickles on the left.
Correct.
And then soon after, Geary receives orders saying, "No, I told you to go," and he leaves Greene's brigade behind.
Exactly.
1,400 or so men.
1428.
1428. Exactly what I was thinking. All right, so they're left behind. Now, people who might go to the battlefield today might be trying to imagine this while looking at Culp's Hill. How the hell did they see this division leaving? You can't see anything.
Okay, the answer is skirmishers. Skirmishers are in contact with the other skirmishers.
Okay.
When you leave, you pull your skirmishers in. And so the Confederates notice that the Union skirmishers are leaving. And they say if they're leaving, they look and there's nobody there.
So they would actually, even though they were leaving Greene behind.
Yeah, well, it starts at one end of the line and works its way up.
Okay.
Yeah, see, Williams is at the lower hill.
Okay.
And he leaves first, and his skirmishers leave. All of a sudden they say, hey, it looks like they're leaving. And then Geary starts to leave.
And the reason they can also see the skirmishers is now they're down,
they're in front of
there
the main
with
line.
them.
Right.
But also the undergrowth that we see today that makes us say, oh, how could they see this, was not there.
It's not there.
Okay. And why?
Because of the animals.
The animals.
Yeah, we have cows, pigs, sheep, goats, and they're short-legged animals. They eat what's underneath them. Mm-hmm. No giraffes or elephants. They can eat the stuff up on the top of the trees. These things eat the stuff that's down below.
Right.
God's weed whackers.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
okay.
And they work every day because they don't work, they don't eat.
Sure, and also they want to get out of the sun.
Oh, absolutely.
And the woods provide that shade.
Yep.
So you have this down on Little Round Top too, as well as McPherson's. I mean, anywhere there was woods, you were able to see through roughly, pretty relatively easily, because there were no bushes like there are today.
Manicured woodlot.
Yeah.
If you go to the tower at Culp's Hill today, you'll see a Matthew Brady photograph on the plaque. It says it was taken 12 days after the battle.
Right.
It's showing the breastworks, and you can see right through those trees. Mm-hmm. Or at Spangler Spring, there's a 1883 photograph of a reunion of the 2nd Massachusetts. As you look south, you'll see on a rock the 2nd Massachusetts monument, and behind it today, you can't see through those trees. But in the photograph there by Spangler Spring, you can look right through the trees.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big thing, because I don't think I learned that until maybe 10 years ago, and by that point I was already into this battle for probably 15 years. And I always had that problem when I would go around and they would talk about, and the artillery fired through these woods or over or across the field, but then there's woods in the way, which now they're not, because they've cleared all the woods that weren't there. But there are still some things that they're not doing, like clearing the undergrowth. And that could be something that could throw a visitor off when they come here and take a tour and look at Culp's Hill and try to imagine all the stuff going on. So you got to imagine that you could actually see from the bottom of the hill up, maybe?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So Johnson begins his attack. Greene is the only guy up there. He spreads his line thinner. Right. Okay. Who makes first contact? Now, how many men does he have again? 1428?
1428, five regiments, all New Yorkers.
And he's facing three brigades.
Yes, a Confederate army.
Of how many men?
Somewhere between 4,800 and 5,200 Confederates. But he's got the hill. He's got the hill.
And some of his men are in a pretty good position because the hill in front of them is a very tough slope to scale.
Yes. The northern slope is almost directly vertical.
And it would have been Jones's brigade against them?
Jones' brigade.
Okay.
Correct.
What happens with the battle when they make contact? How does it go?
Okay, as Greene was left behind, he eventually was told he could stay. He's the one that blew the whistle on the Confederate advance.
Okay.
So he stays. He's told you have to occupy the whole line. So he's starting to stretch his men down the hill to occupy a line that was held by a corps before. All right, now you got three brigades, Confederate Army. Brigades in the Confederate Army are bigger generally than brigades in the Union Army. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at a better than 4-to-1 advantage, better than 3-to-1 advantage for the Confederates. And basically Jones is going to make first contact because he's going to get, he's closer to the Union line when he starts.
Okay.
It goes across Rock Creek, and what happens at Rock Creek is some of Greene's skirmishers are still there. And they're going to delay the Confederates because they know where you can cross, and the Confederates don't.
Okay.
Okay, so the John Calvin Owen Reddington, commanding Greene's skirmish line, is going to put his men where you can cross. And he's had all day to figure that out.
Right.
So it slows him down. So when Jones comes across, he can't move to the right because of Union artillery in Cemetery Hill. So he's forced to ascend the hill at its steepest point.
Okay.
Yeah, one of his regimental commanders in his report after the battle said we needed scaling ladders to take that hill.
Right.
Because it's almost straight up.
Yeah.
So Jones makes first contact, generally hits about the 60th New York at the top of the hill, probably some of Wadsworth's men that are still up there as well. And then eventually comes Williams' brigade, okay, and this is Jesse Williams, who's commanding. It's really Nichols' brigade, Louisianans, and they come across, and then they're going to hit probably into where the 78th 102nd New York is located, And then Stewart's Mongrel Brigade. See, it's not pedigree.
Mongrel?
Mongrel. Oh, yes,
Okay.
it's a mongrel.
Okay.
You got 3 Virginia units in there. You got 2 North Carolinians, and you got a Maryland outfit.
Oh, it's a mix.
It's not pedigree. Okay.
All right.
And they come across in 2 waves because they were supposed to, advance down towards along Rock Creek, and all of a sudden, they strike the Union line, and one part of the brigade was ordered to turn. The other kept going and said, "Whoops, we better turn too." So then they're coming across.
This is they're the last brigade in line.
Flank.
The southern, the southernmost brigade.
And so what you have here is basically the largest differential in numbers, in many ways, in the whole Battle of Gettysburg.
Okay.
Okay, and it's there on Culp's Hill. And of course, they hit it, and there's like 4 separate attacks there. Notice that's because as different units come in, they fire and their guns are. And so what you have then is this fighting, and it occurs at night.
Right.
Because they can't really see.
Yeah, now that's the other thing too, is it's getting dark.
It is.
Which is going to, I guess in the end, it's going to help the Union, because there comes a point, and tell me if I'm jumping ahead here, but there comes a point where I believe it's Stuart's men actually occupy some of the earthworks or breastworks that were left behind or left unoccupied by Williams's men, I believe.
Yeah, Williams's men.
Okay, and they actually have a clear line to the Baltimore Pike.
They do.
Okay, so maybe this is a good point to explain to everybody why that is, and it could have been an exciting thing for the Confederates if they had actually taken advantage of it. Why the Baltimore Pike? Why is that important, and why didn't they actually take it if they had a clear line to it?
Okay, it's good questions. The Baltimore Pike is the spinal cord of the Union Army. It's their line of command and control, so they have to hold that. It's supplies, if no other reason. It's their main way out of here if they have to, get off, leave. It's also the main line to D.C. The Baltimore Pike doesn't go to Baltimore. It goes to Washington, D.C.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's 97. You can Google it. You have to take my word for it. Okay, so 97 goes to D.C. Northern Army has to protect D.C. So the Baltimore Pike, in more ways than any other road, defines the Battle of Gettysburg.
Interesting.
The Union Army's wrapped around it in that fishhook shape we talked about earlier. The hill that it goes over, Cemetery Hill, next closest hill is Culp's Hill. It's right there.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's
the
why
road
it's
goes
important.
between the two hills.
Yeah, it goes right between them.
Yeah.
And so you have to hold those Culp's Hill Cemetery if you're going to use a Baltimore Pike, at least at Gettysburg.
Sure.
Okay, so that's why it's important. Now, when the Confederates cross the Union trench lines, they know they're in the Union position. Where's the fighting? They can hear close to them. Closest to them is up to their right. So you don't march away from that. So they wheeled to the right and marched up the hill rather than going to the Baltimore Pike. Once again, like you said, a little bit of daylight. They see the opportunity.
Yeah.
They go straight crash into the rear of the Union Army. What happened when that happened at Chancellorsville?
Right.
And the Northerners ran.
Yeah.
Okay, so this might have been the greatest opportunity for Confederate victory in the battle.
But those were Germans.
Well, there's Germans on Cemetery Hill. 11th Corps, what's left of it.
Oh, that's
there.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So, right, okay. So, Howard sees Greene is in trouble.
Yes.
And he takes the initiative, doesn't he? And he sends some troops over to help?
Well, what I say is usually Greene, once he's told to stay, he starts sending staff officers to see if anyone can help him.
Oh, okay.
And one of those gets to Howard.
Okay.
And Howard sends a brigade
Okay.
over to help Greene.
I can't remember. Whose brigade is it?
Well, it would be von Amsberg's brigade.
Von Amsberg.
Yeah.
Amsberg is how you pronounce it.
Amsberg. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I'm
Irish.
That wasn't
We
one of the
can't
ways I
talk.
pronounced it.
But anyway, they come across. So but the first reinforcements that come to aid Greene, this will be on his right. It's turned. Okay, the right flank of Greene's turned.
Okay,
Because the Confederates get over the trenches. Rather interesting situation, because the first Confederate monument anywhere at Gettysburg, very first one, is placed on Culp's Hill by what I call the 1st Maryland Confederate.
Okay.
Okay, they put it there, and they're in Stuart's brigade attacking. So it goes up in 1886, and they had a big argument over it. They weren't going to let them put it there. And why? Because of the wording. Because in the wording it said, at 7 p.m., we took these entrenchments. And the Northerners wouldn't let them put it there. Because you didn't take them. They weren't occupied. So they insisted that you use the word occupied, as you did. Use the word occupied.
Yeah.
And so they're sitting around in a little place in Pikesville, Maryland. These old veterans from the Confederacy, and they're trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do about it? One old guy looks at it and said, well, if we occupied them, that means we took them, didn't it? And they said, well, yeah. And so they decided to change the wording, and that's how the first Confederate monument gets to Gettysburg.
Okay. Now,
but that's where they're going to confront the 137th New York, which would be the right flank. It's the 20th Maine of Culp's Hill.
Okay.
It's the right flank of the Union Army.
Now, does that was it the First Maryland you said?
Well, it was part of them. Yeah.
Does that monument also have the distinction of being the only or one of the few Confederate monuments on the Union lines?
I guess you could say that, though they put some North Carolina monuments up a little later that are real close to the Union position. But it's the only one that occupies a position that was at one time occupied by the Union.
By the Union.
And that's because you have to put your first monument up where you're formed for battle. Well, on July 3rd, the 1st Maryland formed right there.
Okay.
It's the only Confederate monument with flank markers. Only one.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the only one that has an advance marker to go along with the flank marker.
Okay. Now,
So, yeah.
you use some terms here. Use flank markers and advance markers.
Yes.
So, for the layman out there listening, what do those mean?
Okay, they fight in lines, and lines have two things, a beginning and an end. And so one end would be, depending on which way you're facing, one end of your line would be the left flank, end of the line, and the other would be the right flank, end of the line. And so they don't only show you where they fought, they show you on how much ground they fought on.
Right.
Now, the stipulation was once you put up your marker where you formed, you can put an advance marker up to where you advance to.
Right.
Keep in mind that most of the Confederate monuments here are put on Seminary Ridge. They didn't fight there.
No.
Not on the 2nd and 3rd. They formed there.
But
and they advanced to the Union line.
But also the Confederate monuments don't go down to regiment for the most part.
No, they don't.
Right.
You're right.
So they're state monuments.
Correct.
Just a tribute to the guys from the states that fought. So the advance. So like, can you give me off the top of your head an example of a monument out there that has an advance marker?
Well, 1st Maryland Confederate for one.
Okay, besides that.
Okay. The 123rd New York on Culp's Hill has an advance marker out, a little one out in the woods. Nobody ever really sees it. If you read the monument, it says it's out there.
Okay.
27th Indiana in Spangler Spring.
Yeah, in Spangler Spring.
But if you're talking about Confederate, the most recently placed Confederate regimental monument to the 11th Mississippi on Seminary Ridge.
Yeah.
Just south of the White Abraham Bryan farm, which is on the Union lines. There's a little marker just west of the famous rock wall showing how far the 11th advanced. And a little bit further south than that, the 26th North Carolina's advanced.
Okay. Now, why do they get... I know these we're skipping ahead as far as battle action goes, but why do they get to have regimental monuments?
Oh, I better handle this one, I think. I don't know if you want this now. In 1992, I gave a tour to a guy named Billy Ross Brown. Wonderful man. His great-granddad was in Company A of the 11th Mississippi. I had already explained to him why there were very few Southern monuments, because the Park Service in the 90s had already said no more, because veterans weren't putting them there. Right. I can still hear him say, while we were following in his great-granddad's footsteps of the 11th Mississippi, damn it, there's going to be a monument to the 11th Mississippi here someday. And he had enough clout. He worked for the federal government. Trent Lott was in the Senate at the time. I think he was the majority leader. And in Memorial Day weekend of the year 2000, we dedicated not only the main monument there on Seminary Ridge, which is a nice monument, but also that forward advance marker.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. It helps to know people.
Yeah. You might want to cut that out and put it in a later episode. I don't know.
No, we'll revisit it on the later episode, because you have a good story about the 11th Mississippi and one Jeremiah Gage that I always like to hear. So we'll have to have you back on for that, because Bob hates doing these things.
I know he does.
He loves it. He pretends he doesn't. All right, so let's see. Anything else about the fighting on the 2nd that we should mention now before we move on to the 3rd?
Well, the fighting on the 2nd was much more in the Confederate favor on Culp's Hill than was on Little Round Top. For example, if you look at 137th New York, they're fighting elements of the 1st Maryland, 3 Virginia regiments there, as well as elements of probably 3rd North Carolina. So you got 4 full regiments and part of another that are attacking their position.
I can't. So what'd you say? 127th,
37th.
Yeah.
They how many men did they have?
Well, they're going to have a little over 500 men.
Oh, okay, so it's pretty big.
Yeah, it's not. Well, let's compare it to the 20th Maine. 20th Maine has over 400. Okay, they were attacked by a regiment and a half on Little Round Top.
Right.
These guys have a little more men. They're going to be attacked by 4.5 regiments. All right, so the numbers are greater for the Confederates. The thing to keep in mind is that if you look at the losses, 20th Maine suffers the highest losses on Little Round Top, 128. The 137th New York suffers the highest losses on Culp's Hill, 137.
Okay.
Both of them suffer 32.4% losses. Same percentage of loss. Now, arguably, the 137th fought again on July 3rd. Some of those losses are there, but the vast majority of them are on the second day.
Okay.
Charlie, if I can interject,
Sure.
I think I remember you telling me once before that a larger percentage of casualties in the 137th New York than you would expect are coming from the right companies.
Exactly.
An indication of the fact that they were being flanked.
Absolutely right.
And could you talk a little bit about the prescience of Colonel David Ireland? Was it he who built the Traverse, or whose idea was that? What is that?
The Traverse, there's a line that was built off the main line. It's kind of interesting. It's one of the more mysterious parts of Culp's Hill. Where was it? How big was it? Who built it? When? I think Greene ordered it once he built his trenches. The reason he built it because when he comes up there, he's the end of the line. And so he wants to make sure the flank's secure, so he bent it back. It's not. I don't think it makes it to the modern-day Park Road. Okay. One of the curious things I noticed in reading about Culp's Hill, nobody really mentions the Traverse right after the battle.
Okay.
Okay. It comes into the literature in the post-war years in the Century magazine. 2 articles, Jesse Jones, who's in the 60th New York, which would be opposite the other end of the line for the Traverse, and General Greene mentions it. Okay. But it is somewhat of a fallback position for the 137. Company B was on the right flank, and they took the highest losses of any unit in the 137th. Now, when the 137th was extending their line down towards Spangler Spring, they're going to be flanked as the Confederates occupy those trenches we talked about.
Okay.
They're going to wheel and flank the 137th. What do? You refuse your flank.
Right. In other words, you take a part of your line and you bend it so that it's facing the new threat. So you're now fighting on 2 fronts.
Exactly.
Okay.
No longer a 180-degree line, but a 90-degree angle.
90-degree angle.
Right, yeah.
You make the letter L.
Right. Okay.
That's what you do.
Fun fact, if you Google Culp's Hill Traverse, the first 2 pictures are of Charlie Fennell.
Are they really?
Is that right?
Yeah.
Let me see.
So I was at the Traverse.
Right
then.
there,
Oh, okay.
and right there.
Yeah, I found it.
Fun fact,
yeah,
one
fun
of our
fact,
licensed
yeah.
battlefield guides was the speaker for the dedication of the John W. Geary Monument at Culp's Hill.
In 2011?
Think about how old that guide must be.
No, because that's a trick. That was dedicated. That was built in the early 1900s, but it was dedicated just a few years ago.
That's right.
And that guide would be?
Charlie Fennell.
Charlie Fennell.
We really did get the Culp's Hill expert.
Right. He's the.
According to Google, at least.
Yeah, I don't know why they picked me, but I was proud to do it. It was one of my most famous things at Gettysburg.
Hold
At
on.
least one of my most memorable experiences here.
Hold on. Say that again.
It was one of my most
Wait,
memorable.
not yet.
That was Stewart's brigade turning our flank.
They just turned the whole flank.
No,
Yeah.
so you got to dedicate the monument?
Yeah, I was the master of ceremony at the dedication. They put the monument up in the early 1900s, as you said. I think it's 1911 or something along that line. And then what happens? World War I comes along.
Right.
And so they never dedicated it.
Ah, okay.
They put it there and never dedicated it. And I have a friend by the name of Shelton Munn, who was a guide at one time. And he was up there in Harrisburg, and he said, that's a shame. They never dedicated
Munn's
it.
Diamonds up in here.
Munn's Diamonds.
Let's give him a plug.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and he has a jewelry store.
Oh,
up there.
okay.
Yeah, and so he got the ball going and started pushing the right buttons, politicians, and eventually got them to be allowed to dedicate the monument.
We just recorded something the other day for an audio tour that we're making for Gettysburg, and we have a stop that's all about Geary. That guy, he was 6'6", 260 pounds, something like that.
Yeah, he was about 2'5" here, but he put on weight later.
Okay,
as we all do.
As we all do.
Why are you looking at me, Charlie?
I was looking at Jay.
And in the Mexican War, I think it was at the Battle of Chapultepec, he was wounded 5 times.
Yes.
And then he was wounded a couple more times during the Civil War.
Yes.
And here he was. And he went on to be the military governor of Atlanta, and really a fascinating life this guy had.
That's right. First American mayor of San Francisco.
That's right. Youngest too, right?
Yeah, I believe it was, yes.
And he also was the governor of the Kansas Territory during Bleeding
Military
Kansas.
Governor, yes.
And did not get along too well with the pro-slavery crowd, and left for fear of his own life. And so, but really a fascinating guy, but you don't hear a lot about him, but there are a lot of things around the country named after him.
Yeah.
Geary County in Kansas, which used to be named Davis County after Jefferson Davis.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
And there's Geary Street in San Francisco, right. Geary Street in Harrisburg, Geary Street in some other...
Mount Pleasant.
That's where he lived, yes.
Yeah, Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania.
And, of course, here we have Geary Avenue.
Sure.
And he's a really fascinating guy and a fine example of an American. The guy he was always doing something.
Yes.
Even though he was a politician, and they're not exactly the best examples of Americans, but sometimes you get a good one. And he seemed like he was an all right guy. Yeah. All right, so now what's important to note before we go into day 3, the July 3rd fighting at Culp's Hill.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
You can always edit it out. Talk about, Charlie, the incident at Spangler's Spring at night. The supposed meeting of Union and Confederate forces.
Okay.
Getting water.
Yeah, so when the battle ends, there's confusion. And, of course, the men that left were ordered to come back.
Right.
And so when they come back and Williams' division starts to trickle in, that'd be Ruger's brigade. And their entrenchments, a lot of them were across Spangler's Meadow.
Right.
So as they move across, they run into Confederates at the spring. And they captured several of them and brought them back. And they said, well, if they're over there, let's go get more. And so they sent them over, and only a couple of them come back because Confederates now know they're there.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the time of the battle, there was no camaraderie that I know of. Let's share the water. Okay, one said y'all, the other said yuns, and they start shooting. Basically, that story comes more from the reunions after the war, when they're trying to heal the wounds.
So in other words, it's something that they made up in order to make it seem like...
Yeah, I think it gets confused. I mean, certainly during the reunions, they would share the water and have that going on.
The fire water.
Yeah.
So all those stories... Because I know there's other battles where there are stories like that, troops meeting across a river, exchanging coffee and whatnot. Is that all just fabricated after the fact for reconstruction purposes and reuniting?
No. Those stories where they change are usually when they're in fixed positions and there's no battle. They're in, their guard, like on one side of the Rappahannock.
Yeah. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it is.
Trading tobacco for coffee.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Even sometimes you invite somebody over to your camp.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a baptism on the Rappahannock River, and I think it was the winter of 1862, and the Union soldiers are going to be singing along with some of the Confederate soldiers.
Really?
One of the old hymns.
Yeah, but once the battle starts...
It's like...
But that was more of like in a standoff position. They would do that, but not in a heated battle.
Kind of like the Christmas armistice during World War I, right? Like... We'll take a break on Christmas time and sing O Tannenbaum.
Yeah, if you have an armistice, I mean, a lot of times, especially at a place like Vicksburg where you had all the dead laying out in the middle of the lines for a while, you could organize a truce. And then you go out, then there'd be camaraderie.
Right.
Because you're truce, nobody's shooting, you're trying to pull the people apart. And there was numerous examples of guys that served in the old army there at Vicksburg. They get out there and see one another. They talk to one another and that sort of thing. But not once the battle's live.
But that's just such a great example of the insanity of war.
Sure.
That just because you call a truce, you're going to like bring out your dead or bring back your dead.
Yes.
And you're like buddy with the guy that might kill you tomorrow.
Exactly.
It's very strange.
Yeah, but when you mean this day and age, the word civility has been in the news a lot.
Yeah.
With our political situation,
right.
and people can't even be friends with someone if they disagree with them politically.
Right.
And now
let's go to the Red Hen tonight, guys.
Exactly right. They're getting kicked out of restaurants for whatever reason, and here are people that are shooting at each other and then
hanging out,
having the civility to be able to just have respect for at least the fallen.
Yeah. It's very weird.
Different times.
Yeah, exactly. So we interrupted the story here. So was the 2nd Massachusetts?
You're talking about the charge on the next morning.
Well, the 2nd Massachusetts was
the guys coming into that area. Yes.
Yeah,
right.
But the story you're thinking of.
Yeah, where is this? Is this in Fonce's book where a Union officer is at the spring filling a canteen, and he's going to carry on a discussion with another soldier there? And as I've heard the story, and I think it's Fonce, but I'm not sure. We'll have to double check. Something like, what regiment are you? And the guy says 23rd, and he says, well, 23rd what? And expecting something like New York or Pennsylvania, the guy says 23rd Virginia, what do you think?
Yeah.
And then they both kind of realize at the same time that they're opposing side, and they kind of back away from the situation. But, is that just one of those stories?
No, I think that happened.
Okay.
Yeah. Individuals.
Mm-hmm.
You're standing there with a canteen in your hand, there's the enemy. What are you going to do? I'm back away.
Yeah.
It's dark, you can get away quickly.
Yeah. So, night falls. Now, but some of Ruger's men have come back, but find that they can't get to where they left. Williams' men.
Yeah.
But it's dark.
It is.
So they maybe have a little fighting going on, and then they say, well, let's wait till the morning.
You make noise, people shoot at.
Right. So just pot shots, shots in the dark, literally. Yeah. The night goes by.
Okay.
4:30 in the morning. When does the fighting resume?
That's when the artillery opens fire.
And how much time has passed since the end of fighting the night before?
I'd say it probably ends at least heavy fighting by 9:30, 10 o'clock. Okay. But then you still have, as more troops are coming in, you have constant shooting on Culp's Hill throughout the night.
So it's chaos then, really, throughout the night, because these guys are coming back expecting to see one thing or find one thing, and then they find that it's not that way, and the enemy is there, and they just came back from fighting down on the other end of the field, and so they've had quite a wild day, to say the least.
How would they navigate movements like that at night?
Oh, that's a good question.
In the pitch dark, in a wooded area.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, was it pitch dark?
There was a full moon.
There was a full moon. Okay.
Yeah. But a lot of the Culp's Hill, of course, is in the woods.
Yeah.
So it's still dark.
It's still dark. Yeah.
But there's a little bit of light.
They'd use lanes. Yeah. Familiar lanes.
Okay.
That they'd lay out. I mean, the roads are obvious. And then there were roads connecting the roads, and then lanes connecting the roads. So they would know which roads to use.
Would they have guys posted along those roads as kind of guides?
Would put men there.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, one of the problems you got at Culp's Hill now, Green has the staff officers trying to direct people as they're coming back, but there's only so few staff officers.
Right.
So a lot of, especially Kane's brigade, when they come back, the fighting had just ended. They want to get into their entrenchments. So when they walk up there, they get shot at, and they think it's Green's men. And so they have to send men out to announce who they are. Mm-hmm. And supposedly one of the stories, a guy goes out and announces, he says 3 cheers for Abraham Lincoln in the Union.
And they shoot at him?
Said the woods fairly erupted in flame and smoke. Weren't any of those people up there now, you see. And so this was the confusion of the evening.
Yeah.
In the evening of the second, morning of the third.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So one thing, I don't know if we mentioned this before, that when Geary goes following Williams, and I'm backing up here a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
When he goes following Williams, he gets lost.
He misses the turn at McDuffer's golf course. I don't know how he did.
That would be the Granite Schoolhouse Lane.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Oh, was it the golf course then?
No, the golf course wasn't there.
Was it the putt-putt?
Yeah, he missed the turn there.
And that's closed now anyway.
Yeah, and he said it's because he was following what he thought was Williams' men.
Uh-huh.
And they proved to be stragglers.
Really?
And they were going down the Baltimore Pike. That means you're marching away from the battle.
They were deserting.
Well, I don't know if they're deserting. They just want to get out of the fight.
They had tickets for the Orioles game.
Yeah, and so they're going down the Baltimore. When he crosses Rock Creek, he started to think to himself, and this is the way we came in.
Right, okay.
And so he goes there and he waits for someone to come and get him.
Instead of sending someone to say, hey, help us?
So I'm over here. We only have one brigade with him because Kane turns his men around and marches back to the side of the fighting.
Oh, so he takes the initiative and says, so why doesn't he tell Geary?
Well, he didn't. For whatever reason, he didn't. He's not a professional soldier.
Oh, he's okay.
So he said, well, there's the fighting. Geary's going where he is. I think I should go back and help Greene.
Let me ask you, when you give a tour and you mentioned that the order of march was Candy, then Kane.
Right.
Does any idiot make a joke about candy canes or anything?
Sure, you can put Greene in front of him. Then you got a Greene candy cane.
Okay, so you're the one that makes the jokes.
Well, if you're trying to learn the order of battle, you need these little devices.
Oh yeah. No, believe me, I'll be
especially on Culp's Hill, because whoever talks about Culp's Hill.
Exactly. Except for us.
Yeah.
Not only a mile or so away from the battlefield, from the hill itself.
A mile from it. Right.
Okay. So it's 4:30 in the morning. July 3rd. Okay. Lee's orders are what at this point?
Okay, there was continue the attacks on July 2nd simultaneous at dawn.
So keep going.
So what Lee envisions is continue the attack on Culp's Hill by Ewell's men.
Uh-huh.
And then Longstreet was make a simultaneous attack on Cemetery Ridge in the morning. Okay. So this was the attack at dawn order. It was July 3rd, not the 2nd. Okay, and the problem is, of course, Ewell was ready to attack because he's already there.
Right.
And whether he's ready to attack or not, the Union are going to preempt him because they realize how close the Confederates came to cutting the Baltimore Pike. So in the morning of July 4th or July 3rd, 4:30, they begin an attack on Greene's on the Confederate position on Williams' line. From the Baltimore Pike area.
What is that, Wolf's Hill? And
well, be Powers Hill.
Powers Hill.
Be along, the Ruggs Ridge, there where Hunt Avenue is today.
Okay.
The Visitor Center.
We're right where we are.
Where we're sitting.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're going to attack and try and push the Confederates out. And now, so Ewell has to attack. He can't disengage. He doesn't find out until after this attack has gone on for several probably close to an hour, that Longstreet isn't ready. He won't be ready till 9 o'clock. Okay. So you got from 4:30 to 9 o'clock, you're expected to fight on your own. And then we find out Longstreet and Lee decide to alter the orders, and they're going to wait. They're going to mass Pickett and others to strike the line once they find out what's going on Culp's Hill. So basically what you have is a Second Corps under Ewell. Close to 10,000 men are going to be engaged for 7 hours of close combat with about 12 to 13,000 men in the Union Army.
During that morning?
That morning, July 3rd.
Because Ewell has reinforced from Rhodes's division.
Yes,
two
he's brought
brigades,
troops across.
O'Neill's and Daniels.
Yeah. And he's also got extra Billy Smith coming in, oldest general here, 65, and ready for Medicare.
Same age as Charlie. And I'm the same age as George Sears Green.
A great deal if you can get it.
Oh, okay.
and Walker's brigade is here. The Stonewall
Brigade comes in.
Right. That was Stonewall Jackson's former brigade.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, you're okay. So that's 7 hours that they're fighting,
right,
before the sun even comes up.
Well, the sun's up
starts.
by then.
Well, it starts
before the sun comes up. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so by the time that's all over, we didn't even get to Pickett's charge yet.
We haven't.
Right.
They've done more before noon than Pickett did all day long.
Yeah.
How about it?
Yeah, really. So, and that's crazy because a lot of people who, especially if your knowledge of the Battle of Gettysburg is the movie Gettysburg or The Killer Angels,
right?
You might not realize how much. I remember when I first learned that they were fighting all morning long.
Right.
I was astounded that I never really learned. You don't know that. It's not a popular part of the history.
Well, longest sustained action in the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah, longest sustained close
fighting. That's crazy.
The problem is, Culp's Hill was only mentioned in the book Killer Angels.
Right.
And I think there's 2 or 3 lines dedicated to it in the movie.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah. When they were talking about
Trimble, yeah.
Yeah, and Trimble got it mixed up.
Okay,
in the movie, it's mixed up.
How did he get it mixed up?
Well, he was talking about Culp's Hill when he should have been talking about Cemetery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
all right.
So he gets it mixed up, but they didn't see fit to reshoot the scenes. And furthermore, Pickett and Pettigrew were reversed anyway in Pickett's charge, but they were running out of time.
Really?
Yeah. Just a little. Don't tell anyone I told you. You can leave it in if you want. But I mean, they got them reversed.
Yeah. No, that's great
But
because
they didn't mention there was no action on Culp's Hill portrayed in the movie.
Right.
Very little said about it in the book.
Well, have you ever seen the deleted scenes?
Yeah, I have.
And they actually have a scene with Ewell and all of, I think, all the Second Corps commanders.
Yes.
And in Lee's headquarters.
Right.
And it's actually kind of pretty boring. Actually, I see why they cut it out.
Yeah,
but it explains all that stuff.
Right.
You know, everything that went on there. Oh, yeah, it's on YouTube. You should. We'll watch it when we're.
Yeah, the only thing about Ewell in there, he comes in, he says, well, he made a mistake and should have taken that hill.
Yeah.
You know, and Lee says, that's fine, you did well, we'll get it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Type of thing. So that's the only thing you see with Ewell.
Honestly, I think the Trimble performance was better. That guy.
Trimble remembers it differently than most people.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, you know, he doesn't mention that until like 1872. Trimble's 60 years old. He's from Maryland.
Right.
You know, and the only one who remembers it that way is Trimble. Now, of course, Rhodes doesn't survive the war, so we don't know what his. But Early doesn't remember that way. And basically, what Ewell told him when he kept telling we should give me a brigade, I'll take that hill. He said, when I want the opinion of a junior officer, I generally ask for it. And that's when Trimble stormed off to leave.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
so it was a little ruffled feathers.
Yeah, it was a little ruffled.
All right.
You know, and of course, what's Ewell waiting for on July 1st? He's waiting for Johnson's division to come in.
Right.
So he doesn't have a brigade to give him.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go in with one boot off like Longstreet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, now, in those 7 or 8 hours, like, we can't brush over this. I mean, right. what goes on in those 7 or 8? How close do the Confederates get to taking Culp's Hill?
They actually got over the breastworks at one point.
Okay. Which part?
Near the saddle, near the lower part of Upper Culp's Hill. I think it was some North Carolinians got over. And one of the problems you have, 7 hours, how much lead can you carry?
Yeah.
You can't carry enough for 7 hours.
Right.
So they're constantly relieving the line. Okay.
Meaning that they're the guys who are on the line now, they send back to replenish and they send in fresh troops. Okay.
And they generally try and do it by brigade to keep the continuity.
So when we're saying that, X amount of brigades are fighting X amount of brigades, they have reserves. They're not full brigades fighting full brigades, correct?
Well, not everyone on Culp's Hill is involved in the front lines at the same time. Because of the lack of space. So there would be a couple of brigades of Confederate Army in reserve that will move up occasionally. The Union have more in reserve as they start flipping them. Okay. And what they do is, when the other people on the line run out of bullets, they communicate that.
Right.
The other ones come up, fire a volley, and then you run out and they run in.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If I can interject, the 6th Corps, Shaler's Brigade, has also moved in for this morning fight. Yeah. And lines of supply are much to the advantage of the North because you have the Baltimore Pike behind you with the lanes Charlie mentioned, as opposed to what do the Confederates have in their rear?
They got Rock Creek. So you can't get the bullets wet. They don't work. People.
Right.
They don't work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you have to unload them and put them in blankets, and then they put them on their bayonets on top of their guns and carry them across Rock Creek. Right. Let's hope nobody falls.
Yeah.
Right. No, so you're basically waving a target up in the air. Yeah.
Of course they were in the woods, but it's a much more arduous and difficult task for the Confederates to bring bullets up than it is, as Bob said, from the Union. They got the supply line right there.
And let's consider that the North has superior numbers, and they still have that breastwork, and the Confederates are working uphill.
Yeah. It's a mission impossible on July 3rd.
That's an important factor, too. The Confederates are working uphill, and the Yankees are just kind of shooting down at them. And when you're attacking uphill, where do your shots tend to go? Do they go high or low?
They go high.
They go high, so you end up missing a lot of your guys.
That's why the trees, if you look at the trees on Culp's Hill when the battle's over, the photographs,
they're
shot all the way up to the top.
Yeah.
That's because a lot of people are overshooting.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not because they sucked as marksmen. It was because of the nature of shooting uphill.
Shooting uphill.
Yeah, I guess is it that they're overcompensating, or
it could be,
or is that just a natural mistake that someone would make?
It's natural.
Yeah,
I think it is to overshoot.
Okay.
The guns don't have the muzzle velocity to keep the bullet going straight. So when you fire a musket in the Civil War, the bullet tends to rise anyway, and then drops into the target.
Okay.
So if you don't understand that and they're close enough, you aim at their chest, you hit a bird in a tree above them. And usually see it with green regiments that haven't fought before.
Yeah.
That's usually
a lot of dead birds.
But even at Petersburg, when these armies are veterans, you have accounts of where the troops go in and they're shooting high there, and they had to be corrected. And of course, you got to take into account the smoke.
Yes. Okay.
Which clouds the target.
And the fear, and there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of stuff going on in a situation like that.
Yeah.
It's not like in a movie.
No.
So
it's not orchestrated.
Right. Okay. So the Union is able to replenish the line with ammunition and men, and play this leapfrog game, or this little back and forth with regiments in the line. The Confederates aren't able to. They have to take a hill. Now, am I correct that the Union troops are able to retake the trenches that the Confederates occupied?
It's a kind of interesting story because there's three, I guess, major Confederate assaults on July 3rd.
Okay.
And the final one involves Stewart's Brigade, Daniel's Brigade, and the Stonewall Brigade.
Okay.
So you got three brigades, and it's around 10 o'clock, 10:30 there at the earliest. And they make an assault there across Pardee Field, which is the open field there behind Williams trenches, which the Confederates have. And they're going to make an assault there. As soon as they move into that open field, the artillery of the Union line just rips them.
Okay.
Okay, and so they're driven back. It's during this assault where one unit left the breastworks too soon. Some of Daniel's men, I think it might be the 43rd North Carolina, actually got for a time over the entrenchments.
Okay.
Okay. But that's the 1st Maryland. That's why they put their advance marker there for the Confederates, because they were in that charge there. Once that charge fails, they know they can't go forward. That's it, because of the Union artillery. Confederates cannot deploy artillery to use on Culp's Hill for fear of hitting their own men.
Right,
okay?
So they have to do it strictly with infantry.
Infantry. And that's another advantage the Northerners have on July the 3rd. And so at that point they realize they can't stay and they can't go forward.
Right.
And so they start to withdraw. By 11:30 noon, they're starting to pull their troops off of Culp's Hill.
Now, the Union artillery on Culp's Hill is not effective after the Confederates, like maybe make it across Rock Creek or something, or like by a certain point they can't depress the guns enough to fire.
When the Confederates made their attack on July 2nd, those guns were gone.
They were gone?
Yes, they weren't there.
Okay.
And that's because when the 12th Corps was ordered to go to...
They took the guns.
They took the guns with them.
How about on the 3rd?
Third day, they're not there either.
So the artillery fire coming from the Union...
It's come from Powers Hill and where we're sitting here, the Baltimore Pike line.
Which is really kind of to almost the right rear, or the left rear of the Confederate line.
Yes.
Okay.
Key word.
Rear. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, I know.
They're firing right up Rock Creek.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
They're hitting some of their own.
They're hitting some of their own, yeah.
The Union.
Well, yeah, and that's because the Union line, in order to connect it, had to form across the meadow there by where Ruger's brigade is.
Right.
It was McDougall's brigade. It's kind of out there in the open. A lot of times they'll fall short. I mean, and then the fuse will burn quick and it bursts over your head. So you have numerous examples of regiments of McDougall's brigade being hit by friendly fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
It happens.
Yeah. And of course, my favorite story about that is Selfridge, who commands the 46th Pennsylvania. He's kind of a fire and brimstone type of guy. And when his men are getting hit, he goes back to Powers Hill. He's got a sword in one hand and a cocked pistol in the other. And he's yelling, "Who's in charge here?" And all these guys are looking at Lieutenant Muhlenberg. Little Lieutenant Muhlenberg. "I am." And he told him if he didn't correct his range, he was going to shoot him dead on the spot. Muhlenberg said, "I'll see to it." I'll see to it.
I bet.
Okay. So, you get a little irate when you're being hit with your own artillery. It's bad enough if the enemy shoots you, but
Sure, yeah.
And of course, the 20th Connecticut's there. Worcester will arrange to have a relay system established to tell the gunners on Powers Hill if they're hitting right or wrong.
Okay.
It's one of the first examples of forward observers in the history there, and it's on Culp's Hill.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's because his men are getting hit. One of the more famous is George W. Warner. Had both his arms blown off by his own artillery fire. They left him for dead. Why wouldn't they? And when they went to get him, he's still alive. So they sent him to the rear, and he's still taking nourishment. Okay? George W. Warner, when they dedicated a monument, I think it's 1885, will raise the flag from the monument of 20th Connecticut, Culp's Hill. They put the rope around his waist. I like the story a lot of guys would tell about put the rope in his teeth.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. No, that was at a monument in Connecticut where he did the teeth thing.
Okay.
Here they tied the rope around his waist and walked away, and the flag went up on a pulley.
That's awesome.
Okay. They took a picture. The rock he's sitting on, the photograph's still there. Call it the Warner Rock.
Wow.
Okay. Now, I used to feel more sorry for Warner until I did some research on him. I have some pictures of he and his family. It was sent to me by a friend of mine up in Connecticut. But anyway, he dies July 1921. He dies July 1921. He lived 60 years after the Battle of Gettysburg. He was 93 years old when he died. Lived 60 years without his arms.
Wow.
He fathered 3 children.
Well, you don't need your arms for that.
Well, there you go. Okay. That's it. A very active man to the day he died.
Yeah, wow.
George W. Warner.
Good for him.
Yeah.
So, Charlie, I'm going to ask you about some other stories.
Okay.
Maryland versus Maryland
Yes.
on Culp's Hill.
Oh,
Sure.
good one.
Okay, the 1st Maryland Confederate, of course, is fighting in the ravine. And as the Lockwood's Brigade comes up to relieve the line, elements of the 1st Maryland Eastern Shore were there, established on the Union line facing the ravine and Pardee Field.
Right.
So when the 1st Maryland made their attack, they're actually attacking men from Maryland. And it's an interesting story. 2 things. One, some of the men of the Eastern Shore were in the 1st Maryland Confederate.
Okay.
And that's because in 1862, I believe, they were ordered into Virginia there to suppress drug smugglers. Okay, and that's drugs being medical supplies.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
so they
yeah,
went
yeah.
in, and this company refused to violate Southern territory. We'll defend Maryland. We're not going to invade Virginia. So they were dishonorably discharged. Those men are now with the 1st Confederate Maryland, fighting against their former unit on Culp's Hill. The flag bearers are first cousins. Flag bearers are first cousins.
Wow.
And that's of the Eastern Shore?
Eastern Shore.
With
John
the 1st
M. Ross.
Maryland CSA.
Yeah, John
Okay.
M. Ross. He's the Yankee boring name. The Confederates, Percolus M. Moore.
Oh, that's a Confederate name, yeah.
My gosh.
Percolus?
Percolus M. Moore.
I've never heard that name before.
And he's wounded. And one of the stories, and I can't confirm it, but it's too good a story not to tell you, that his cousin went out and drug him into the Union line to get attention. Now, he's not going to live. He's got shot. Can't do a thing for him. So Percolus M. Moore dies. But this was a moment of compassion.
All right. Now, is that what's depicted on the monument to who is that in the parking lot over in the?
That's a northerner, but could be. That could stimulate because that's the Maryland State Memorial has a Confederate and a Union soldier trying to help one another.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not that story.
No, I don't think that's specific to that story. But it might have spawned the idea of doing it. Yeah.
Tell us about the dog.
Okay, the dog. Good story. The dog. I don't know as much about a dog as a lot of other guys at Ledge. I don't know the name of the dog. I don't know any of that story.
Rufus.
It's Rufus. We'll call Rufus today. But anyway, there's two Maryland regimental histories of the 1st Maryland because a lot of those guys are editors of papers in Baltimore after the war's over.
Right, lots of papers
I've read
there.
them and I haven't found the name of the dog. My guess is the dog is a true Confederate volunteer. As they're going through Maryland, dog comes down, barks at him. It's a Maryland dog, gives him some bacon and a hardtack. He follows you. So he's with the regiment when they made that final charge across Pardee Field.
Okay.
And the dog is wounded in the charge.
Oh.
And he's limping along on 3 legs, and he's linking the faces of the wounded Confederates that are laying there. And Thomas Kane sees this. He's commanding Kane's brigade. He's right in front of Kane's brigade. And so he brings the dog in with the wounded Confederates. Later that day, and I think it's because of Confederate artillery firing over Cemetery Ridge hitting Culp's Hill, the dog was found dead. Okay, so when the battle ends and Kane's having his men buried, he had the dog buried with his men with full military honors as the only Christian-minded being on the field. He said all the men here were trying to inflict pain. He said this was the only creature trying to alleviate it.
Yeah.
And so that's the story of the dog,
Yeah.
as far as I know.
On my tour, sometimes I'll say he was the only. Oh, hang on. There was a dog wandering amongst the bodies as if he's trying to make sense of the madness.
That could be too.
Later, riddled with bullets, he's licking the hand.
And he's
of
in
a
that
dying
famous
man.
painting.
Yeah.
The Rothermel painting in
the
Harrisburg.
Rothermel painting up in
at the
Harrisburg.
State Museum in
He's
Harrisburg.
leading the charge.
Yeah.
If you want to see a copy of that at that plaque up at the tower of Culp's Hill audience, there's the Rothermel painting. Look in front of the rock wall for the little black, I think
Black
it is,
dog.
dog.
Yeah.
Black dog.
Yeah. Yeah, and I that's when stories like that, I can't understand people who don't like dogs.
I know.
You know?
Yeah.
They're sweet animals. All right, so Culp's Hill dies down.
Right.
Ewell gives up,
Yeah.
basically. He can't do it. Can't make it
can't
happen.
break through.
It's tough.
Can't break
He
through.
tried. Now he falls back to where?
Goes back on the other side of Rock Creek towards Benner's Hill.
Towards Benner's Hill.
Yeah.
And do they have like some kind of entrenchments there?
They're behind a hill.
Behind the
Yeah,
hill.
so they don't really need. And then he left some men on Culp's Hill, some
Is
skirmishers.
okay.
To just pop at the Union to present a presence.
Right.
there.
And in case the Union decided they were going to come down, then that
Then
would
they
be a
would know
warning.
they were coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ewell sits there now for the rest of the day, and the battle ends after July 3rd, and
Right.
the 4th is when they begin the withdrawal.
Confederates that evening will begin the withdrawal. It rained hard that day. And so...
The evening of the 4th.
Well, the day of the 4th.
Or the day of the 4th. Okay. No. They begin the withdrawal on the evening of the 4th.
Yes, you want to wait till darkness because it'll screen your
Sure.
movements.
So they're all just preparing then.
Yes, they're getting organized, especially the wagons.
Yeah,
Go
okay.
get the wagons, put the wounded in. What routes are you taking?
Yeah,
And then in the evening, that's when they start.
And how long does the wagon train stretch for?
Well, the one wagon train that went through Greencastle is 17 miles long.
17 miles. I can't imagine.
17 miles. Took it 9 hours to pass any given point.
God.
And that's not all the Confederate wounded. Some were left in town.
Yeah.
Some were with the other wagon train that went towards Monterey.
Right, okay.
So that was
California?
all pretty much wounded.
Monterey, California.
yeah,
The Monterey Pass.
Except we're going
It's
to
on
the
the way
beach.
to California. They're headed west. On their way. Yeah, so that was the wagon train of misery. Ewell's men will be pulled around
Yeah.
to Seminary Ridge at that point on the 4th. Because Lee is using it. Then they entrench Seminary Ridge.
Okay.
There's Confederate entrenchments. If you know where to look, they're still there. So Lee's ready. Come and get me, please.
Okay.
Okay, he's like Rocky.
I'm going to find him. Don't tell me where to look. I'm going to find
Okay,
him.
you find.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're over there.
I have to go in the woods, don't I?
There's some on the edge of the woods.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but they're really beaten down.
Okay.
They're really beaten
So I
down.
have to look with a keen eye.
Yeah, the last Confederates leave the area morning of July 5th from Seminary Ridge.
Okay.
Head down to Fairfield Road.
Who are they?
They would be elements of Rhodes Division.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Rhodes Division, 2nd Corps.
Okay.
The famous picture of the 3 Confederate prisoners.
Yeah.
They're on Seminary Ridge with the railroad ties. Okay, that was taken from the last position the Confederates vacated. They used the railroad ties to entrench.
Huh.
There's a stone wall there
No.
and says breastworks of the Confederate Army, but we know it was railroad ties because we have the photograph.
Okay.
That photograph is reproduced on the seminary property.
It is.
Yes,
that's correct.
now.
Yeah, it is.
And you know what's interesting? If you look closely, I saw a colorized version of that photograph where it was.
Ted Turner did it?
Yeah. Today I'm going to colorize the moon. Yeah. So it was really clear. Like I mean, they really sharpened it and everything, and it's in color and stuff. And if you look in the background, in the distance, you can see the National Tower poking above the skyline.
Okay. That's the poplar tree on Cemetery.
Oh, is that what that is? I thought that was the
That's how they
tower.
located where the photograph was taken.
Okay.
Because there was one giant poplar tree on the top of Cemetery Hill opposite the gatehouse.
Oh, is that what that is?
And it fell probably in the early 80s,
1980s.
1980s.
Really?
Yeah, it was there that long.
Opposite the gatehouse, east or west of the
It
gatehouse?
would be east of the gatehouse,
East
on
of
the
the
other
gatehouse.
side of the
Okay.
road. From the gatehouse.
Near where the Hancock statue is in that area.
Okay.
Okay.
Somewhere. Mary Tebby, who was with, she was a Vivetier,
with the Michigan.
105th Pennsylvania, something like that.
She was from Michigan, I think, wasn't she?
And she was there. They have a picture of her standing by that tree.
By the tree.
In 1863.
So you mean then that so this Pete and I were talking about this before when we were on Benner's Hill and the tree situation.
Yeah.
And there's a picture on one of the plaques up there. I think it's the one about Latimer's Battery, and there's a shot from the early 1900s of what the War Department had put up to mark the battery where it was facing Culp's Hill.
Sure.
It had those old piles of cannonballs next to the cannons, right?
Yeah.
And you could see Culp's Hill much clearer. You could see the observation tower, but the tower towers over the trees.
Right.
But now the trees are starting to cover the view.
It's hard to find a tower.
You can't see it. And I was just up there the other day, you can't see what you used to be able to see because the trees are blocking it. They're going to have to do something about that soon. But what was the point? Oh, the point was that the picture you're talking about, that you could see that poplar tree.
Yes.
From that far away back then shows how much of nothing there was around here tree wise, because you can't do we know the spot exactly where that picture was taken?
Pretty much. Yeah,
so I mean, if you went into that general area, that spot, you would not be able to see Cemetery Hill from there, would you?
Well, if we're the
see the Blue Water Tower.
Yeah, you have poplar trees on Cemetery Hill. You wouldn't be able to see a lot of Seminary Ridge from Cemetery Hill, looking at it from the tree to the Confederate position.
Right.
If you're looking at it from the Confederate position to the hill, you can't see a lot of Cemetery Hill.
Right.
In fact, I don't know if you can see any of it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, if it isn't trees, it's buildings now.
But there in that picture, it just seems like this wide open plain.
Yeah,
all
it's
the
wide
way.
open.
See, now I got to go look back at that now, because I never could figure out.
Yeah.
I really did think
Looks
it was
like
the National
Tower. I like that analogy.
No, I said that on Instagram. Go ahead, steal it. Yeah, I'd be honored.
I want to ask Charlie about something else. It might be edited in. You might like
go
this.
ahead.
Yeah.
I remember once on a battle walk back in the 90s with you telling me a story, or telling us a story about a cleft rock that's there just north of the Lesser Summit, where a Union marksman was shooting at a Confederate. Is this sounding familiar?
Yes. The Cleft Rock is probably where the Confederates were. Okay.
What is it called?
Cleft Rock. It's a rock that has a slit in it.
Sure.
There, and the Confederates were using that to shoot at the Union position. Sergeant Mainland, Company K, 111th PA. They come from northwestern Pennsylvania. They're deer slayers, hunters, good with the guns. Mm-hmm. And he was especially proud of his marksmanship. So he shoots at this cleft rock where the Confederate was, and puff of smoke comes out again. Must have missed him. Fires again. Puff of smoke comes out again. My gosh, I'm a better shot than that. Takes deliberate aim again. Boom. Puff of smoke again. Finally shoots the fourth time. And so when the battle's over, he wants to see why he's missing the guy. He walked over, there's 4 dead Confederates behind the rock. He hit him every time. The fourth guy closed the opening so no one else would use it.
Okay.
Yeah, so he actually hit 4 Confederates.
I love that story.
So they kept replacing the guys.
Yeah, that was in the 111th Pennsylvania.
Well, it's frustrating.
History.
It's frustrating when you're shooting at something that you know is an easy shot and you're not getting it, and then you realize it's something stupid like you forgot to readjust your rear sights or something like that.
Yeah.
So I can imagine how
he was very upset with himself.
Yeah, of course, especially if you've got a reputation as a great shot.
Sure.
Okay, so on the morning of the 3rd, Charles Mudge is going to get an order. And he wants it repeated.
He does.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Mudge is commanding 2nd Massachusetts, and there's some confusion over the order. Evidently, they wanted to drive the Confederates out of the Union entrenchment, Stonewall, Coble Rock, up in that area there. And so the Slocum sent word down to have that done, and the order allegedly comes to Colgrove. Okay, it was
Brigade Commander, Union Army.
Yeah, Brigade Commander, Union Army, and it was delivered by Captain Stillwell, I think is his name, Stillwell, and he gave
Stillwell Angel from League of Their Own.
Yeah, League of Their Own.
Little fat kid.
He's everywhere, but he comes from essentially Slocum, gives the order to Colgrove, and then Colgrove decides what to do.
Yeah.
And evidently the order was to drive the Confederates out or to see if they're leaving.
Okay.
Okay, so Colgrove realized a skirmish line isn't going to get across that field, Spangler's Meadow. It's not getting there. So he selected 2 regiments. The 2nd Massachusetts is in front in the meadow anyway. So they're in position already to make the charge. So he picks another regiment. That's the only room you have. You only have room for 2 regiments.
Okay.
So he picked the 27th Indiana. Why? It's his regiment. I think he doesn't want people to think he's being favoritism. So he sends the word to Mudge to attack across that field.
Okay.
And Mudge is looking at the field, and he knows the Confederates are over there, and he asked the staff officer to repeat the orders. And he says, you are to attack across this field in battle formation. And Mudge looked at him and at the orders. He said, well, it's murder, but it's the orders. So he gave his men orders to form and attack, essentially into Spangler Spring.
Right.
Is where they go. 27th Indiana in support. The second highest losses on Culp's Hill is the 2nd Massachusetts, 136 casualties. One less than the 137th.
Yeah.
Including,
most of them in that meadow.
Including Charles Mudge.
Including Charles Mudge.
Oh, okay.
And they couldn't figure
so it's his own murder.
Yeah, so when they come back, they're supposed to get into position, and nobody's giving the orders, and Morris, who's the senior captain, is wondering where Mudge is, and he finds out he's dead. So I guess I'll give the orders. So he does.
And the 27th Indiana suffered pretty bad, too.
Yeah, they take over 30% losses in that attack. There. An interesting story about the 27th Indiana. Company B, supposedly the tallest company in the Union Army. Company B. Had to be over 6 foot tall to get in. Not over 6 foot tall, join Company C. They'll take anybody. Okay? And the commander of Company B at Gettysburg is David Van Buskirk. He's 6 foot 10 and a half, weighs nearly 400 pounds. Jeez. A huge guy.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. And he's in that field. He's out there in the field where the advance marker is. 4 color bearers killed, 4 color bearers wounded, right there. And there's Big Dave Van Buskirk, And so after the war, he ruined his first baby daughter's life at birth. Why? He named her Gettysburg Van Buskirk. Kelly's a much better name for a girl,
Kelly is a much better name.
Buskirk,
That's the greatest name ever.
Yeah. So now you know why the South lost. They can't hit a Yankee that big in the middle of an open field. How do they expect to win a war? You see? And when he died, they usually had the funerals at their home. Okay, so we don't have a casket like this on stock, and Amazon's all out.
Right.
So they had to make it in the parlor. So there he is in the parlor. They had the funeral. Now they got to get him out.
They can't get
him out. They had to tear part of the wall down to get him out to bury him.
Oh, my
He's in
God.
Monroe County, Indiana. Monroe County. That's where the university is. Boy, wouldn't Bobby Knight love to have him as a
Yeah, right.
You see? So that's David Van Buskirk.
David Van Buskirk?
Buskirk. B-U-S-K.
Buskirk. Okay.
He had 2 brothers in the war, too, both over 6 feet tall. Unfortunately, the only picture of them, they're all sitting down. We don't want to see that. We want to see how tall you boys are.
Yeah.
One, I think, is 6'4", the other like 6'6", 6'7".
Damn.
So pretty big family.
Charlie, who is Ninian F. Knott? K-N-O-T-T.
Well, Ninian F. Knott. Oh, my gosh. He's not a Yankee. Yeah, Ninian F. Knott was in the 1st Maryland. He was wounded at Culp's Hill and was captured by the Union and sent him to the Giant store. Out there, Camp Letterman.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have stuff at the Giant store for Camp Letterman.
For those of you who don't know, that's where the Union Hospital, the last Union Hospital was. Today there's a giant food store nearby.
Yes.
Yeah.
Preserving
and
our
Letterman
history.
was the chief of the ambulance corps, that sort of thing. And he came up with the system of removing wounded still used by the military today.
Triage.
Yeah, triage system. That's a Letterman, Major Letterman. And so he was removed there, and evidently he dies. And they bury him there with the Maryland troops from the Union, probably. So when they go to rebury the Union, they bring Knott along, and they bury him in the front row of the Maryland section. So there he is, a Confederate buried in the all-Yankee cemetery, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Another thing is very interesting. Very interesting. You go to the Maryland section, there's a stone, tells you how many Marylanders are there. It says 22. Don't believe it. Count them yourself. There's only 21. There's like one's missing. He's wandering around here somewhere. I know he is. But there's only 21. It says 22. I found that out on a tour I had with a bunch of 5th graders from Maryland. I remember they're trying to be very, serious and dramatic. It's a cemetery, show respect.
Right.
And this kid's going back through the graves, and he's looking at the graves, and I just ignored him. That's the best thing to do with 5th graders.
Sure.
And maybe they'll go away. And he started yelling, Mister! Mister! And I said, what? And he says, you're missing one. And I said, what do you mean we're missing one? He said, there's only 21. I said, all right, let's count them for little Johnny. So we all counted them, and we all came up with 21.
Really?
Never argue with a 5th grader.
Wow, yeah.
So there's one missing there, but Nott is in the front row. He's one of what we think to be 9 known Confederates in the all-Yankee cemetery.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And the 9 known, were they known later on, or were they put there?
They were known at the time. They wouldn't be buried.
Right. So it was just an accident that they got in there.
A name has a record.
Uh-huh.
And you can look till you're blue in the face at all the Maryland, 1st Maryland, East Shore, 1st Maryland, Potomac, Overgrade. You don't find a Nott in either one of them. You go to the Confederate roster, there he is.
Ah,
there he is.
I think he's MF Nott.
I think he is MF, yeah. The thing to keep in mind, June 30th, most important day. That's payday. 2 months pay. Even the most cowardly coward shows up to get paid. After all, they deserve it too, right?
Yeah.
And so they have to sign. And so if you have those muster rolls, you can pretty much guess accurately who was here on July 1st through the 4th.
Right, okay.
Because they don't have to. And there he is. He's on the June 30th muster roll for the 1st Maryland Confederate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's how we know.
And
that.
the name is what?
MF Nott.
MF Nott.
That's the way he is on the stone.
KNOTT?
KNOTT.
All
That's
right.
right.
Oh, I think it's K. Oh, never mind.
What do you think? It's only one T?
No, I don't know.
But
I think it's 2 T's. No,
I think it's 2 T's.
I can't remember who's K or who's Ninian now, but
Okay.
I can't remember. But that's
Other-
okay. One more thing, Charlie, for me. You're gonna edit this out, I hope.
No, I'm keeping that in. That was the most entertaining part of the whole.
A Union officer, am I correct in this, will summarize the futility of the 3rd day's fight on the Confederate part. Something like, the amazing thing is that they persisted for 7 hours in what must have seemed impossible after the first half hour.
Yeah.
Does that sound right to you?
Sounds like maybe it might be in Geary's report.
Okay.
Geary has a way with words.
Okay.
And if you want to learn more about Culp's Hill from a man that was there, you should probably start with Geary's report.
Okay.
Because he tries to make sense of the confusion. He has times, and it might not be right, but at least it gives you
He's
a
trying,
framework.
yeah.
Yeah, he said the most amazing thing was they persisted for 7 hours trying to break through a position that was mission impossible.
Yeah, that's what astounds me so much as to why it's not as popular. I mean, 8 hours, 7 hours, that's a long time.
it is.
After you just did it for a couple hours the night before.
Yeah.
And it's up a hill. I mean, I don't know.
It's a dramatic episode that still needs to be revealed.
Yeah.
We need another movie.
We do. And it's just
Devils.
about Culp's Hill.
Healing Devils, we'll call it.
Healing Devils?
Yeah, we'll fix all the problems in the other
Okay, yeah.
Oh, there's more stories, though. The guy who's got body armor on,
Oh, yeah.
and a bullet hits him right where it overlaps,
Yeah.
and it saves his life.
Oh, because it overlapped.
Yeah, it was Jesse Jones.
The general?
No.
No.
Yeah, Jesse
Union
Jones was
stuff.
a commander he was a captain of Company I,
Okay.
60th New York. And at the Battle of Chancellorsville, they're getting ready to go across the Rappahannock, I think. Might have been the Rapidan. But anyway, big rainstorm, pontoon bridges are underwater, and as they're getting ready to go take their turn going across, they notice all these metal things that look like eggshells. And the captains, they don't know a thing. You want to know anything, you ask the sergeant.
Right.
So the first sergeant is James Brown. And he's feeling good. James Brown. He said, Sergeant Brown, what are all these things? And Brown says those are those bulletproofs the Germans wear. They don't like being shot, so they put body armor on. Now, body armor is still common in Europe at this time.
Okay.
But they don't. They take them off when they run because they slow you down.
So now, when he's saying those Germans, he's talking about the 11th Corps?
Yeah, 11th
okay.
Corps. Now, this is not fair, 11th Corps. But anyway,
Right.
they had the reputation. They got blamed for everything.
Yeah.
Scapegoats.
Yeah.
Okay, and they fought very desperately here on the first day. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the thing to keep in mind is I know why they took the body armor off. Those things weigh over 20 pounds of metal.
And hot.
And you strap them to your chest. Okay? And there's a pontoon bridge that's underwater. And the water's flowing over. And you got to walk across it.
Yeah.
And it's slippery.
Yeah.
And you got 20 pounds of metal strapped to your chest.
No.
I don't think so. I'll get rid of them. I can buy more on the other side. Okay? So that's why they're there. He picks them up, puts them in the wagon. At Gettysburg, he has them put on.
Okay.
And during the attack on July 2nd, the Confederates come right up to the line. He said they came within 15 paces of our line. And he said there was a Confederate took a bead on me. And he said I couldn't react. The bullet hit me in the chest. And he said I felt excruciating pain, fell down. And I'm still breathing. Okay? And so he looks, as Bob said. And the bullet hit right, like my shirt.
Right.
You know, see, my shirt has a double line here where the buttons fit together.
Right.
That's the way the body armor is.
Yeah.
And your shirt's probably the same. You have buttons on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
and
a button-down shirt for those of you who can't see them. Yeah.
Okay. Hit right there. And if it had hit a little left or right, he thought it would go through the metal. Now you got to remember, this guy's in the seminary. He wants to be a minister before the war. And all of a sudden, let's go shoot Americans in America. He doesn't know if that's God's plan. So he's a little concerned. Okay? And so he decided, all these people are joining, I better join too. Seems like the right thing to do. And if it's a wrong thing, I'll go talk to the boss and we'll work it out. And so this was his sign from God that he made the right choice.
Okay.
Guess what he does as soon as the war's over? He gets his butt back into that seminary and finishes his studies and becomes a Presbyterian minister.
All right.
In Ogdensburg, New York. Jesse Jones.
Jesse Jones, wow. I could sit and talk about these stories all day.
Yeah,
with about Culp's Hill, because it's all new to me, so it's fast. I'm like learning everything.
How many rounds of ammunition were expended?
Well, that's a good question. I just figured it out the other day.
Okay.
I was bored. And so Geary's division, a little over 3,000 men, July 3rd, 277,000 bullets fired.
Wow.
Okay. Now that's a little over 3,000 men. Okay. Let's say there's 23,000 on the hill. Do the math. 1.685 million rounds are fired on July 3rd alone. Okay.
Just at Culp's Hill.
Just at Culp's Hill.
Yeah.
But if you figure 10 million rounds are fired, what is that? Let's say around 2,000 rounds. If you put it in the third day, you got well over 2,000 rounds fired. So 1 in 5 bullets fired at Gettysburg is fired on Culp's Hill.
How many tons of metal flew through the air?
Okay, well, you know, it's a good question, and Hunt has the answer. What did he say? It was 700 tons of artillery ammunition was fired in the battle.
Oh, just artillery.
Just artillery.
Union.
Yeah, but I don't know about the bullets. They didn't keep track of that. Hunt's only keeping track of the artillery ammunition.
Wow.
I think he said 700 tons of artillery ammunition.
That's
was fired.
crazy.
And no wonder those trees were dying.
Oh, yeah.
At Culp's Hill.
I know.
Yeah.
And they got one in the visitor center now from Culp's Hill, still has lead and iron in it.
Right.
From Culp's Hill.
Yeah.
Where are you going to go? I'm going to Culp's Hill.
Yeah.
I want to see the damage. I
Absolutely.
want to see the damage. I want to go to Lower Round Top. Nothing there.
Nothing there.
Rocks.
Rocks.
You know, why would I go there?
Who cares?
I'm going to Culp's Hill.
Good tie-in to what we started with, and I think we should end with that.
Okay.
That's
very
why
good.
we go to
Hey, well,
Culp's
thank
Hill.
you guys for letting me.
Thank you,
share
Charlie.
my
This was
experience.
great.
This was great.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah.
You know, thank you guys. And maybe we can get the truth someday.
Maybe.
I'll come back.
The truth would
Thanks again.
Well, no, we'll have you on it for something else, too. This was
Okay,
this was
very
fun,
good.
because we're
I
going to be
enjoyed
talking
it.
about a lot of different things on here.
enjoyed it.
All right, well, anyway, for myself and Peter Bonfanti, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Charlie.
you.
Thank you.
And, of course, thank you to Gettys Bike Tours. Go to gettysbike.com and book a tour today, because it's the best way to see the battlefield. Or in a
Absolutely.
car with Charlie. Charlie, how can people... I know you guys aren't supposed to advertise, but...
They can call the park and ask for me. That'd be one way. I'm in the phone book. I'm the only Fennell
okay.
in the phone book. If you know what a phone book is, I'm in there. Okay. They only have a quote on Fennells here.
Okay. and
One's
only
enough.
one-
One's enough. Okay.
All right, so they can call the visitor center, right?
Yeah, get my
the
contact
reservation
information.
desk,
Yeah,
or something
reservation
like that.
desk. Get my
Okay.
contact information.
And Charlie Fennell, Fennell,
2 L's.
2 L's and
Separates
2
us from the
N's.
spice.
Okay.
Of the same.
I was gonna make a joke, but I don't know enough about that spice, so I couldn't do it. All right, well, definitely worth taking a tour with Charlie. You don't do bike tours though.
I do occasionally when I call and nobody's got ahead of me.
You do?
I do occasionally.
All right, well then you can get a tour with him through Gettysburg.
Tour. You probably use the electric ones now. Get older.
We just took a ride on those today. They're fantastic.
Yeah. I could actually probably ride up Culp's Hill with
backwards.
Oh, you go right up the slope. If only the Confederates had them at Gettysburg.
Oh, they would have. Yeah, if Stewart had electric bikes at Gettysburg, oh, how things would have changed.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, I better get on my way. Sorry, Bob.
Yeah, I'm sorry I kept you longer.